Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the world's two largest economic partners, allies for over 70 years, are suddenly at each other's throats. The transatlantic relationship that rebuilt Europe after World War II, created NATO, and established the foundation of global prosperity, is now hanging by a thread. This isn't a hypothetical scenario anymore. It's happening right now, in 2026, and the economic shockwaves are about to hit every corner of the planet. Welcome to the new era of the US-Europe rift, where trade wars, territorial disputes, and trillion-dollar decisions are reshaping the future of the global economy. The cracks in the transatlantic relationship began widening dramatically when President Trump announced something that shocked the world. He didn't just propose new policies or renegotiate trade deals. He demanded that the United States acquire Greenland, the massive Arctic island that belongs to Denmark. And when European nations refused, Trump responded with what he does best: tariffs. Starting February 1st, 2026, 8 European countries, including Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland face a 10% tariff on all their exports to America. By June 1st, that number jumps to 25% unless Europe agrees to sell Greenland. But why Greenland? The answer lies beneath the ice. Greenland sits on massive deposits of rare earth minerals, the essential ingredients for smartphones, electric vehicles, fighter jets, and virtually every piece of modern technology. As climate change opens new Arctic shipping lanes, Greenland's strategic position between North America and Europe becomes invaluable for military operations and early warning defense systems. For the United States, controlling Greenland means controlling a critical gateway to the Arctic and securing access to resources that China desperately wants. For Europe, surrendering Greenland means surrendering sovereignty, territorial integrity, and 70 years of post-war principles. The economic stakes couldn't be higher. In 2023, transatlantic trade in goods and services reached 1.6 trillion euros. The United States and European Union represent the world's largest bilateral trade relationship, accounting for nearly one-third of global commerce. American companies have invested over $10 trillion in European assets, while European investors hold more than $10 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds. This isn't just about tariffs on steel or wine. We're talking about an economic ecosystem so intertwined that pulling it apart could trigger a global recession. Let's break down the immediate impacts. If these tariffs take full effect, U.S. exports to the EU could drop by 8 to 66%, depending on how negotiations unfold. European exports to America would face similar devastation. The British Chambers of Commerce estimates that 10% tariffs alone would cost UK businesses £6 billion, rising to £15 billion if tariffs reach 25%. German manufacturers, already struggling with high energy costs after cutting ties with Russian gas, would see their competitiveness in the American market completely destroyed. France's luxury goods industry, the Netherlands' technology sector, and Scandinavia's clean energy exports would all suffer massive losses. But the damage extends far beyond immediate trade numbers. Global supply chains, carefully constructed over decades, would fracture overnight. European car manufacturers rely on American semiconductors and software. American tech giants depend on European engineering talent and manufacturing partnerships. Pharmaceutical companies on both sides of the Atlantic collaborate on drug development and clinical trials. All of this cooperation, all of these integrated supply chains would face disruption, delays, and potentially permanent dissolution. The financial markets are already reacting with panic. European stock indices are bracing for significant losses, and currency volatility is spiking. The euro has already weakened against the dollar, and experts predict further decline through 2026. But here's where it gets truly dangerous. If European investors start selling off their massive holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds, what happens? These bonds are considered the safest assets in the world, the bedrock of global financial stability. If Europe dumps even a fraction of its $10 trillion in U.S. bonds, interest rates would spike, the dollar would fluctuate wildly, and every pension fund, retirement account, and savings plan in America would feel the impact. Europe is now facing an impossible choice. Option 1, cave to American pressure. negotiate some compromise on Greenland, and maintain economic stability at the cost of principles and sovereignty. Option 2. Fight back with their own tariffs and potentially deploy the so-called trade bazooka, the anti-coercion instrument. This never-before-used nuclear option would restrict U.S. companies' access to European markets, exclude American firms from public contracts worth billions, and impose export and import restrictions across multiple sectors. France is pushing hard for this aggressive response, but Germany, with its export-dependent economy, is hesitating. The problem is that Europe's dependence on America isn't just economic. It's existential. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Europe has relied on the United States for military support, intelligence, and defense capabilities. European NATO members receive 64% of their arms imports from America. Nearly half of Europe's military procurement, especially critical systems like combat aircraft, missiles, and air defense, comes from U.S. suppliers. The platforms, upgrades, spare parts, and data systems that European militaries depend on are locked into American technology. And then there's energy. After cutting ties with Russian gas, Europe increased its imports of American liquefied natural gas by almost 4 times between 2021 and 2025. The United States now supplies 57% of Europe's LNG imports, and by 2030, that number could reach 75 to 80%. So when Trump threatens tariffs, he's not just threatening trade. He's threatening Europe's military security and energy supply simultaneously. Christine Niesen, chief analyst at Copenhagen's think tank Europa, puts it bluntly, the dependency is mutual, but asymmetric. For the US, Europe is mainly a major market and industrial partner. For Europe, the reliance is operational, technological, and security critical. That asymmetry gives Washington durable structural influence. So what happens next? In the short term, European leaders are attempting diplomacy. Emergency meetings in Brussels, side conversations at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and back-channel negotiations with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte are all happening simultaneously. Trump posted that he and Rutte are working on a framework to resolve the Greenland dispute, which temporarily eased fears about the February 1st tariff deadline. But no details have emerged, and Danish officials from Greenland have expressed confusion and skepticism about any deal. In the long term, Europe is beginning to realize that it can no longer afford such dependence on America. The response won't be sudden decoupling, which would be economically catastrophic, but rather a gradual strategic hedge. European leaders are now prioritizing diversification, building new trading partnerships with Asia, Africa, and Latin America, developing domestic production capabilities for critical technologies, investing heavily in European defense manufacturing, and strengthening internal industrial capacity. The global economy is watching this rift with growing anxiety. If the world's 2 largest economic powers cannot maintain their partnership, what does that mean for international cooperation on climate change, pandemic response, financial regulation, or any other global challenge? What does it mean for developing nations caught in the middle, forced to choose between American and European economic spheres? What does it mean for China, which is watching gleefully as its main competitors tear each other apart? Trump's tariffs, if fully implemented, are projected to raise $2.1 trillion in revenue over the next decade, but reduce U.S. GDP by 0.5%. And that's before accounting for European retaliation, which would deepen the economic damage on both sides. Trade wars disrupt supply chains, inflate consumer prices, reduce purchasing power, and dampen economic activity across the board. History teaches us this lesson clearly. The high U.S. tariffs of the 1920s triggered retaliatory tariffs globally, contributing directly to the Great Depression of the 1930s. So as we stand at this crossroads in 2026, the question isn't just about Greenland or tariffs or trade deals. The question is whether the transatlantic partnership that shaped the modern world can survive an era where sovereignty, security, and economic interest are colliding in unprecedented ways. Europe must decide, accept dependence and vulnerability, or pursue independence and risk. America must decide, maintain alliances and shared prosperity, or pursue dominance and control. And the rest of the world must watch, wait, and prepare for whatever comes next. Because when titans collide, everyone feels the tremors.